Was good, my fellow peasants? A very touchy subject here. Very touchy indeed. Now, before you go and hit that dislike or like button on me, because I'm sure we all have strong feelings on this, one way or another, hear me out. Let's strip away the feelings, the emotions, the feelings of nostalgia. Let's talk logically. Let's talk like friends. Turn-based combat. Could Final Fantasy 15 or the VII remake have been turn-based combat? Both of them have passed up on the mantle, on the chalice of turn-based combat, neither of them deciding to drink from it. And I'm going to start this video with a disclaimer. I love the route that they have taken with 15's combat. From what we've played in the demos, from what we've seen in the active time reports for what's to come, it is not a mindless hack and slash. No matter how many times people throw that out there in their fits of rage to try to hate on its combat, it is not a mindless hack and slash. It is clear from what we have seen, and I'm sure it's going to become even more evident when the game actually releases, that Final Fantasy 15 affords to plenty of strategic play. And it's the same with the VII remake. Going with the Dissidia-esque style of combat, Square Enix's words, not mine, I have no problem with that. I am perfectly happy with that. I am not one of these people who has a list, I've said this before, I'm not the kind of person who has a list of things that if it doesn't have this, it's not a Final Fantasy. But I am surprised that they've decided to do the remake, that they've decided to steer away from turn-based combat. I am surprised by it. Now, on the other side of my disclaimer, I want to say I love turn-based combat. Absolutely love it. The last game I played was Final Fantasy V. I didn't love the turn-based for nostalgia reasons. It was the first time I'd played it, finally got around to playing it, and I loved the combat from start to finish. It was great. And I don't want to think, or I don't believe that turn-based combat is dead. I don't want to think it's dead. I'd like to think that we could see turn-based combat return to the AAA stage in a significant and meaningful way. In the Final Fantasy franchise, perhaps Final Fantasy 16. I'd like to think that they could create something. And that's the thing, it would take a lot of creativity and reimagination to do that. But I'm ever hopeful that they'll pull it off. Now, with the disclaimers out the way, let's look at the situation realistically. Final Fantasy 15 and the VII remake are on the AAA stage. Very high up on the AAA stage, meaning they are very, very, very expensive games. Final Fantasy 15 needs to sell around about 10 million copies. That's what Square have said, that's their goal, that's their aim, and that is a very ambitious aim, but that's realistically what they need. And with the VII remake costing around, or being around the size of the 13 trilogy, we can comfortably say that too needs to sell around about 10 to 12 million units. That's not an if. That is a requirement. They need to sell those units. Square Enix are a business, they need to turn a profit. That's just a simple fact of the matter, no matter what way you chalk it up. So that's really what the question comes down to. When getting back to the question at hand, could 15 and the VII remake be turn-based? The question comes down to one thing. Could a turn-based combat game in today's gaming climate sell 10 to 12 million units? And I'm going to go ahead and say no. With the deepest of regret, I'm going to say no. And my reasons for them are this. This is massively generalising, but you can chalk it's a generation thing, and you can chalk the generations and chop them up into roughly three main camps. You have you old boys, you good old boys, who were there back when 5, 6 and 7, you were there when they were first coming out. You guys are like the definition of the turn-based combat generation. Then, and you guys still make up about a third of the gaming population. Then you have my generation, what we'll call the interim generation. I'm 23, coming up to 24 now, so I was around about 5 years old when Final Fantasy VII first came out, too young to play it. But I got into Final Fantasy at a later age. My generation, with a generation that we can have a foot in the turn-based combat camp, we can have a foot in the action-orientated camp, I'd say, amongst people I know, from what I know of my generation, and what the figures kind of show, is most of them haven't played, I'd say most of them haven't really played a turn-based combat game. I'd say a good portion of them have, but not a majority. So we're the generation that can kind of have a love for turn-based combat, kind of for action-orientated, a foot in both, neither. You know, it's a bit of a split down the line on that one. And then you have the new generation, the under 18s, the millennials of this era, and they make up also about a third of the gaming population of today. And it is, we can confidently say, they have next to no love for turn-based combat. As a majority, as a whole, they have next to no love for turn-based combat. And why would they? Why would they? What have they had in the last couple of years on the AAA stage, realistically, for them to garner any kind of love for turn-based combat? They haven't. So, and it's not even the case that us who have had the two generations prior, who do have a love for turn-based combat, you old boys and us interims, it's not even the fact that we're all still in. You're not all just in that turn-based combat camp. Many of you have left it. Many of you also have a love for action-orientated games. In some cases, you've completely left the turn-based combat camp. You loved it back then, but you've fallen out of love with it now. And that's what it comes down to. You've got two camps here, the turn-based combat camp, and the simple fact of the matter is, one of them has a chance of selling 10 to 12 million units. Square are not going to sell 10 to 12 million units on nostalgia alone. They need this to appeal to the new generations. And I'm going to show you some more figures to try to support what I'm saying. This is from 2014. This is what to support everything I'm saying here, this is what the game genres sales are looking like. Strategy 4.1%, role-playing 9.5%. And then you've got that massive block, and I think we're all aware of it, that this is where the gamers of today really are. They're in the action and shooter camp. Nearly half are in the action shooter camp. So Unfortunately, as much as I love turn-based combat, I do not believe for 1 minute that a turn-based combat game right now, even with something like 7, as beloved as 7, I don't even believe it would sell 10 to 12 million units. Perhaps I'm wrong on that one. Perhaps I am. Perhaps I'm wrong on that one. But the figures, maybe the nostalgia for 7 is stronger than even I'm anticipating. But looking at the figures, I don't think so. I don't think so. We look at the last number of Final Fantasies, they've only really sold in the region of sort of 6 to 8 million. Final Fantasy 13, the last mainline Final Fantasy we really had, that only just around about got to 7 million, with the trilogy as a whole selling around about 11 million back in 2014, prior to it being released on Steam, so that number has definitely jumped. But we can be confident that while 15, I want to make this clear, they have said that with Final Fantasy 15 it's not a 10 million or bust situation. They did clarify that. they're not going to go broke if they don't sell 10 million units. But we can be confident that it's going to have to sell more than 13. One of the things that every Final Fantasy has always done is pushed the limits, gone the next step further, pushed the boundaries of technology. And 15 far exceeds 13 in production cost. I don't know the figures yet, but I can be certain of that with the quality of engine that 15 is using, the quality of the graphics, not to mention the 10-year, the cost that has accrued over the 10 years that Final Fantasy 15's development has come on and off. It's going to have to sell those. It's going to have to sell those numbers. While 10 million might not be a bust situation, I would highly imagine it has to sell close to that. And no Final Fantasy has really done that for some time, even back when 9 released. 9 is a very popular Final Fantasy that only just scraped over the 5 million line. And that's really the only way I think that 15 or the 7 remake could be turn-based combat, is if they had lowered the production value of the games. If they had used lower engines, if they'd had scaled everything back to keep production costs down, that way they wouldn't be forced to have to sell these kind of numbers, and they wouldn't be forced to make these Final Fantasies appeal to a wider demographic. They could have done the 7 remake just for us, old fogies, us nostalgia fans, scaled it all back and only really sort of aimed to sell around about 5 million units. But we would have got a much lesser quality version of the 7 remake than we are getting. So that is really the only way that I can see from the numbers and from the situation that we have in today's generation of gaming, that either of those games could have been turn-based combat. And finally, I want to give a bit of a personal story here and leave off on that. I want to keep these videos a lot shorter because I have a habit of rambling on. I'm going to give a bit of a personal story here. Among my friends and people I know and people I have spoken to, and my experience of the 7 remake is they saw the 7 remake. I don't think any gamer, regardless of whether you're even a COD player or a FIFA player, you've seen the 7 remake. Any gamer worth their salt has seen the 7 remake trailer. And among my people I know, at least 10 people I know, when they saw the 7 remake trailer, they said to me, or they came to me, because they all know I'm a massive 7 fanboy, and they said, "Oh my god, that actually looks amazing. I'm going to play that." 2 of them even said they're going to get PS4s so they can play it. They're going to get PS4s to play it. And they haven't even played FF7, the original, but they saw that and they thought it looked amazing. Some of them even said to me, have actually said that they wouldn't have got it if it was turn-based combat. They've tried it, they don't like it. But the fact it's action-orientated, and they've seen the combat, they're going to get it. Times that by the new generation. I think that them doing the FF7 remake is the only way. Doing it action orientated is really the only way that they could have brought Final Fantasy VII to today's generation. And that seems to piss some people off. Some people, Final Fantasy VII was their beloved game, and that is fair enough. I get that, I understand that, and I can kind of share those feelings. But is there not a side to you that wants the new generation to experience what we experienced with Final Fantasy VII? Is there not a side to you that wants Final Fantasy VII to be appreciated by everyone and all? Is there not that side to you? I want Final Fantasy VII to be loved. I want Final Fantasy to be loved. The bigger it is, the better, because the bigger it is, the more people who love it, the more chance this franchise has to survive, and I want this franchise to survive. I want Final Fantasy to be going up to high figures, high digits. I want Final Fantasy XXX to be happening. No, I want to see those memes in 20 years' times or whatever of Final Fantasy XXX. We'll have some sexy pornographic Final Fantasy character memes all over the internet. I want that. I don't want the franchise to ever end. Even if they do 15 and the 7 remake action orientated now, that will bring the new generation into the world of Final Fantasy, and the likelihood that they will then go back and play other Final Fantasy games is quite high. And there's a chance they'll start playing those older Final Fantasies, 10, 10-2. Now, if they love the absolute pants of 15 and 7 remake, if they experience the fantastic storytelling that, in my opinion, every Final Fantasy has had. I've never played a Final Fantasy and thought the story was shite. Never. I'm going to say even 13 because it's the Marmite. I love 13 Trilogy's story. I think it's fantastic. So, if they can do that, if they can just even reel the new generation into the world of Final Fantasy, get them playing the older games, they might then start picking up a love for turn-based combat, and then we could see FF16 being turn-based. They could have a stab at reinventing it, reimagining turn-based combat, and bringing it to new life. But as it stands now, it's been quite a while since we've had Final Fantasy on the AAA stage. And as it stands now, I don't think that either 15 or the 7 remake could have been turn-based combat at the current production quality that they are at and sold the units that it needs to sell. But I am ever hopeful for the future. I am ever hopeful that we'll see turn-based combat again. But for now, just get on board. Get on board with it. Get on board with the route that they've taken, the 7 remake in particular. Drop the hatred that they've not made it turn-based combat. If the stories, even if you hate action-orientated games and you're really bitter and you're full on in the turn-based combat camp, which if you are, completely fair enough. But think about it long term. Think about the long term strategy here, and even be a bit selfless. Kind of think of this as, okay, they've not done the 7 remake the way I wanted it, but you're handing it down to the next generation. You're handing your beloved game to the new generation. You know what I'm saying, guys? But I'm gonna leave it there. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Peace and love, people. Peace and love.